freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
Several shots were fired as President Kennedy's motorcade passed through downtown Dallas.
None of us will ever forget this day. Yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world.
This is Houston, say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do to your country.
I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Welcome to the Hagmann Daily Show, weekdays 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And now your hosts, Joe Hagmann and Jon Robberson.
Hello and welcome to this Tuesday, June 12th, 2018 edition of the Hagmann Daily Show. Is there a lot to get into? We saw last night President Trump meet with Kim Jong-un of North Korea in a historic meeting, if you want to call it that. Wait, it's not historic? Let's see what Joe Scarborough said this morning. Let's listen to this. This is pretty funny. If I can get...
Just because something hasn't happened before doesn't mean it's historic. That's one thing. You call something...
I don't know why it's buffering. But he says, just because something hasn't happened before doesn't mean it's historic. This was a talking head on MSNBC's Morning Joe this morning talking about this meeting, and they go on to say, when you call something historic, it means it has a good chance of having lasting implications. And I think it's very unclear, at least to my layman's eyes, that this does that. And this is the sentiment of the mainstream leftist media. Another one is that because President Trump met with Kim Jong-un, he legitimized North Korea and the presidency of North Korea. I mean, what? I don't get it. I mean, I get it, but, you know, do these people ever quit? Ever? Ever? Is there, I mean, is there one thing the president can do that even the people who despise him the most would say, wow, that was a good job?
You know, Joe, even if the man decided to dismiss and disregard the will of the American people and resign today, which is what all these reprobates want, they still wouldn't be happy. They would still eviscerate the man in media until the moment he got on Air Force Two and waved his peace sign around in the air like Nixon did in 1974. So the answer is no. And I'm going to take direct issue with Joe Scarborough and direct issue with listener WW, if you're still joining the show out there, mister. And I'm going to state for the record right here and now that historic means heretofore having never occurred. It has nothing to do with the prognosis of what's going to happen day after tomorrow. Right.
Right. And that's very well said. And, you know, we have interesting reports from Iran warning Kim Jong-un that President Trump could cancel the deal before he even goes home. Iran warned North Korea leader Kim Jong-un on Tuesday against trusting President Donald Trump, saying he could cancel their agreement within hours. Tehran cited its own experience in offering the advice to Kim a month after Washington withdrew from a similar deal with Iran. And this Reuters piece, this is, you know, purely deep state propaganda. Obviously, the deal with Iran that the Obama administration conducted that Trump's administration canceled was a train wreck from the beginning, flying pallets of U.S. taxpayer cash back to Iran by the billions and allowing Iran to continue a nuclear aspiration, a nuclear program, which the Obama administration then came out and said, no, this is, they're not going to have nuclear weapons because of this, directly lying to the American people. And this is something that's completely separate from the Iranian deal. But either way, one of the interesting things that came out of this is the military exercises between the U.S. and South Korea in the Korean Peninsula. Trump has said he's going to end those exercises. And I know just from our own coverage of what Kim Jong-un has said, those military exercises unnerve him. And that must have been either one of the things he asked for, or the president was, doing a show of good faith in order to say, hey, I'm willing to take some concessions myself, and we can start here. So I think it was we did not see any hostility except from Jim Acosta. I don't know how many people have seen. Did you see the news clips of Jim Acosta yelling?
Yeah, he popped off in classic Acosta style.
President Trump and Kim Jong-un are walking and talking, and you have Jim Acosta, the CNN White House correspondent, just a joke of a reporter screaming, Kim, are you going to denuclearize? Trump, how's it going? Yelling across at these two world leaders questions. And it's just so embarrassing to have somebody like Jim Acosta. I bet the world is mocking him today, and CNN for that matter. But it was cringeworthy. It's
cringeworthy, and for the record, I don't know. I won't speak for you, Joe, but I think we might be in a little bit of. I'm in a little bit of an edgy mood here this morning.
Oh yeah.
I think it's safe to say that you're getting the Joe Hagmann, Jon Robberson brand of a downturned Tuesday morning, and I'll say this out of the gate. Number one, historic. It is an adjective. It means famous or important in history, or potentially so. Quote, we are standing on a historic site, end quote. Synonyms: significant, notable, important, momentous, consequential, memorable, newsworthy, unforgettable, remarkable. So, Scarborough, put that in your pipe and smoke it, because what happened in Singapore, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time yesterday, Monday, June 11th, was all of those things. It was historic, notable, memorable, unforgettable, remarkable, et cetera, et cetera. So we can just put the kibosh on that right now. And as far as Acosta goes,
did you see the Dennis Rodman interview with?
Yes, and I was going to actually segue off to that, and I'll hand it back to you here in just a sec, buddy. But Acosta, we have seen over the past week, and I would encourage our listeners, if you haven't done so already, please go back and review the first half hour of commentary led by Doug Hagmann, with interjections and some significant points that you made, Joe, in the first half hour of yesterday evening's program. And the reason I bring that up is we are seeing right now, whether it's on the mainstream media level with Jim Acosta or on the grassroots level with Michael L. Meyer, the head of Vets on Patrol, we're seeing people who are learning, Joe, to hijack the news cycle, to insert themselves into the news cycle, and to break one of the journalism 101 tenets, which is report the news, don't become the news.
Yeah, and that's very well said. And I guess Dennis Rodman, we talked about how there's a historic, at least affiliation between the entertainment industry, the media, and the CIA. And after watching this interview from Dennis Rodman and Chris Cuomo, I have to say that Dennis Rodman is genuinely invested in this, and he started crying on air. I'm going to play a few minutes of this interview, John. Can you still hear the audio when I play it?
The answer is yes, but when the other piece started to buffer, no.
How important is this to you? You talked a lot about the prospects for peace when we spoke several years ago. Did you think this moment would ever come?
Well, in my heart and soul, when I first went to North Korea, I was very honored to even be selected to go there. And once I went to North Korea, I was didn't really understand what the old situation was as far as being over there. And when I first met Kim Jong-un, I was more like, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what he represented. I didn't know if he was someone important. But I knew something was going on. But once I got familiar with the culture and the situation over there, I got really used to being there. I felt like I was at home.
Now, you know both men. You've spent time with the North Korean leader. You've spent time with Donald Trump. How do you think the two men size up in terms of how they might get along?
Well, I think the fact that Donald Trump would understand the fact that the people of North Korea have a heart, they have soul, charisma, and they love each other. I think the fact that Kim Jong-un...
I'm going to fast forward it here. Let me pause. I'm going to fast forward it a few minutes to where...
Still some good insight, though, Joe.
Yeah.
From Dennis Rodman.
It is, but I don't want to have to listen to 5 minutes of the interview before we get to the good part. This is about a minute before he starts crying.
Dennis, did Kim reach out to you or any of his people reach out to you? The president's people, anybody reach out to you for insight into the other side?
Well, you know what? I've talked to those guys the last 5 years.
Which guys?
And I talked to Kim Jong-un and an administration over there 5 years ago. And he asked me 5 years ago, we sat down for lunch. And he sat down and asked me, hey, Dennis, I would like to ask you three things. If you go back to tell the President of the United States these three things, and I would be willing to talk to him. And this is a true story, and I got my people here that was there that heard the conversation. He said things like, if they can move the ships back from South Korea, I would do what I have to do to listen. If you can move certain things or do certain things, I will listen. My ears will be open. And I tried to do that to Obama. And Obama didn't even give me the time of day. I asked him, I said, I have something to say from North Korea. He just brushed me off. But that didn't deter me. I still kept going back. I kept going back. I showed my loyalty and my trustworthy to this country. And I said to everybody, I said, the door will open.
I remember you saying it. I remember you saying it. Let me ask you something. Does Kim understand English, Dennis?
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing. When I said those things, when I said those damn things, when I went back home, I got so many death threats. When I was sitting there protecting everything. And I believed in North Korea. And when I went home, I couldn't even go home. I had to hide out for 30 days. I couldn't even go home. But I kept my head up high, brother. I knew things were going to change. I knew it. I was the only one. I never had no one to hear me. I didn't know one had to see me. But I took those bullets. I took all that. I took everything. Everyone came at me, and I'm still standing. And today is a great day for everybody. Singapore, Tokyo, China, everything. It's a great day.
It is a great day. This is a historic day.
I'm so happy.
You were saying to me years ago that you thought this would happen. And I want to let you be ready for me to ask you another question. I know you're very emotional about this.
Go ahead.
This is what I want to know. I want to know. Well, you're an emotional guy. You feel very deep.
All right, we'll stop it there. And
Joe, that was phenomenal, man. Let's unpack this a little bit.
He's wearing a Make America Great Again hat as he is doing this interview. So it's pretty interesting to see, pretty remarkable to see this unfold. And the look on Chris Cuomo's face, I don't know if he's getting just old or he looks so angry. But yeah, what do you think about this?
Well, I'll direct our listeners first, Joe, to thehill.com. And Brett Samuels posted a piece yesterday at 9:58 p.m. Eastern. So, Joe, this would have been right about the time we were wrapping up the evening program. And I appreciate, by the way, you mentioning a couple times last night that this summit is occurring right now in real time. And we tried to keep people abreast of it. I think it's fantastic. And again, if people want to see the look that you just referred to, they can just go to thehill.com and pull up this piece by Brett Samuels. Dennis Rodman weeps with joy over the Trump-Kim summit. Joe, I understand his emotion. I really do. And I actually have a new level of respect for Dennis Rodman. I've always, in a weird way, kind of admired the guy because he is such an out there maverick. Last week, I made that quip about the chia pet and leopard head, and I was just kind of capping on their hairstyles because they're so unusual. But Joe, I know that feeling personally, and I think you probably do too. But I know that feeling of not feeling like you can go home. In 2016, I was on the road up and down the West Coast. I think I hit like 11 or 12 states in 6 months, because when you get those death threats from keyboard warriors, and stop and think about this, Joe, death threats? Really? Like somebody who's going to threaten you with your well-being, which is, by the way, a felony if it's done face-to-face. So I understand that. I get it. When all I did was upset the apple cart in Hollywood, and then Greg Jackson and Flip Benham and myself and a few others did some shows about abortion within that same period of time. And people can really get angry. So that feeling, he said, I had to defend myself. I had to defend everything I've got. I couldn't go home. I actually know that feeling. And if our listeners have never experienced that feeling, first of all, I don't recommend it. But second of all, it's very profound when somebody sends you an email, Joe, that goes something like this. I effing know what you look like, and I'm going to effing get you, and you'll never see it coming because you have no idea who I am. Yeah, 99% of the time they're keyboard warriors. But then there's that 1% of the time that you absolutely have to stay on guard for. I'm giving mad props to Dennis Rodman today.
I couldn't agree more, John. He obviously is part of this process. He played a role in this, and the emotional tears of joy he has seeing this. And I didn't. That's one thing that I did not know, that he had basically had to flee because of the death threats he got. I did not know he had gotten so many death threats that he did not even feel safe in his own home. I don't even know if that was reported or not. If that was reported or not. But, that's a sacrifice in and of itself. And he, as he said, was persistent. And it's a good thing. And then, that really puts into context, these left communist-leaning journalists that are trying to disparage what was done yesterday. The Joe Scarboroughs and the other pundits who are trying to say this was nothing historic and this is not good for anybody. It just shows you how demented, how deluded and disturbed their mind is, and how in their way of thinking. I mean, it is unbelievable. Nobody can deny that the president, and apparently from what Dennis Rodman said, Obama had a chance to do the same thing. He had the chance to be the one who was there in order to make this happen. And as Dennis Rodman said, he was brushed aside, paid no attention to.
Wouldn't give him the time of day.
Yeah, and here we are. The next, and when Rodman said that, exactly where my mind went. It went to a clip of Obama reading a tweet from Donald Trump about, well, at least I will be remembered as a president. That's exactly what I thought about.
So
when
did
I heard
mine.
him say
That's
that.
exactly what I leapt to. And he not only read that tweet, he articulated it, if I remember correctly, Joe, from the Rose Garden in late summer, early fall.
TV show. It was on a
Yes.
late night TV show.
That's what it was. And Joe, this was an opportunity for Barack Obama, who may or may not have been the 44th president of the United States. We'll probably never know. But he had the opportunity to genuinely lay down some actual legacy. And I heard some interesting commentary on the War Room with Owen Schroyer the other day about trying to in as unbiased as possible manner, enumerate the accomplishments or the legacy that is the two-term administration of Barack Obama. Joe, Barack Obama, due to his arrogance, his hubris, the fact that it is well noted that the man could never get out of bed for a security briefing in the morning, which is the first thing that the president undergoes every morning as soon as he puts on his game face and leaves the residence. And so an opportunity missed. And the other thing I'd like to mention quickly about this is for all of our listeners to take a moment and celebrate today a victory, because we're so run down, Joe. We're so worn out and bedraggled with all of the news. I mean, as I listened to our show last night, which was a great show with Billy Crone, and then followed by some really good historic commentary by Peter Barry Chaka, it's difficult to digest this every day. So when we get a victory, when we have a momentous occasion, Joe, I grabbed like 6 screenshots in my iPhone of President Trump and Kim Jong-un walking toward one another on that red carpet and then shaking hands. President Trump reached over and gave him that sort of what I call the foyer handshake, that gesture of brotherhood with the other hand on the back of the recipient's elbow. Though that was the type of photo, Joe, that if we actually start teaching our children again at some point, that they would see in a history class. And it's just today's a day. I mean, I agree with Dennis Rodman. Today's a great day. It's a day to celebrate. And the last thing I'll say, Joe, and I'll hand it back to you. We can stick with this or move on. But imagine, you got to always stop and think about this. You got to think about things from, or at least try to think about things from both parties' points of view. That's where Americans really hamstring themselves with political analysis is too often, because we're brought up to be very America-centric. A lot of people, and I was one of them, conservative good, liberal bad. Christian good, everybody else bad. America good, everybody else bad. 99% of Christians live in America, and then there's like 1% over in England. All of that is totally erroneous thinking. We live in a globally connected world. Joe, 4 nights ago, I had a 1-hour pre-brief for an upcoming guest in Hanoi, Vietnam. I sat here at my desk after we wrapped up at the studio, and I spoke to a man in Hanoi, 11 o'clock p.m. here, 10 a.m. over there. We're in a global communication world now. So when we look at Kim Jong-un, think about what he gets up and thinks about every day. He's got Muammar Gaddafi. He's got Saddam Hussein. And I don't want to in any way, shape, or form take away from the wickedness of Osama bin Laden or Saddam Hussein. These were evil individuals, but the track record's not looking too good. If you're a malcontent, if you're a quote unquote enemy of the United States, we've got a long track record, Joe, of extending a hand of friendship with one hand and pushing the button on missiles with the other.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we're going to have to see what happens moving forward. And I guarantee, people like John Bolton and Giuliani, there are people who are going to we're going to see our attempted saboteurs, either intentionally or just by stupidity. But what rhetoric is said and what happens after this should be interesting. And what one of the things that is a talking point that's coming out of this, I watched a clip, an analysis by Judge Napolitano, who said that what agreement they signed yesterday basically is it's non-standing. I mean, it's not a treaty. It wasn't ratified by the Senate, but it was the beginning of that process. So when they do, sign agreements and when it does come before the Senate, it will be a much more finished product. But apparently, there already are newspaper outlets saying as much, that the document that they signed is littered with broken promises to denuclearize and former deals gone sour. One of the things that they expected to happen was that President Trump and Kim Jong-un sign a peace deal, at least getting them out of the Korean War, because there's technically we're still in the Korean War, and people expected some kind of document to be signed to say that that's no longer the case. But again, this was the initial meeting. This was the first time a sitting president met with the leader of North Korea. So anybody who wants to poo-poo that, just get out of here. There's no room for that. And I think the majority of the American people, there's no way that they can see this as a negative thing. So regardless of all the propaganda, regardless of all the hate, and I'm sure we're going to get some whoppers of a sound bites as we move through the week, it'll be interesting to see. But I don't think there can be anything negative spun about this. It's going to be...
They'll try.
Well, yeah, they're going to try. And then again, watch from inside Trump administration. Watch the rhetoric that comes from there and see if anybody is trying to, corrupt this new atmosphere of negotiation between the two countries. I think we're going to see that too.
Now that's an interesting point, Joe. And if you care to, that segues nicely off into some other landscapes today, because what we've seen over the past couple of weeks, and maybe I'm seeing it from a little different perspective perhaps than yourself or maybe your dad. I know that I've had occasion to speak with some other show hosts over the last 4 or 5 days. I'm specifically thinking of the conversation that ran over an hour on Saturday with John B. Wells over at Caravan to Midnight. A very productive conversation, kind of the opportunity to compare notes, so to speak, and to extend a hand of friendship over to that platform. And we're going to be working somewhat more closely with them just so that we can present content to our respective audiences. And there is a significant amount of cross-pollination between our platform and theirs. But in tapping the minds of other people, Joe, who have the level of acumen that you and your father do, and then seeing it from my point of view, being not a neophyte, thank you very much, but newer into the environment, the real vitriol, Joe, the real weaponized dissent, and I would say even strategic manipulation, it doesn't come from the obvious camp, which would be the secular, progressive, reprobate, Antifa left. We expect it from there. Where it really comes from, when it really hits below the belt, is when it comes from people who are supposed to be politically, ideologically, and perhaps in many cases spiritually in our camp. And that's when it really, Joe, I'll hand it back to you, but that's when it really gets hard to digest. That's when, like I said yesterday, when I was got a little personal for a moment, that's when it hurts, where you sit there and you scratch your head and you go, why are you people taking this tact? Why are you being so vitriolic and mean-spirited? We're all supposed to be on the same team, and B, maybe we're not doing the greatest job in the world, but man, we're waking up and we're suiting up and showing up every day, and at least we're trying.
Yeah, I don't take. I don't. That stuff doesn't seem to bother me too much. The death threats, the erroneous, statements that are made. And I do like constructive criticism of things that we're doing that could be done better. Absolutely. But see, I don't let that stuff get to me. But listen to this, John.
Yeah, you're actually. Oh, hold on, let me interject. You are just for our listeners' sake, from knowing you on a personal level, I would say that's one of your strong points, Joe. You actually are pretty good at letting a lot of it just be water on a duck's back. If in fact you were a duck.
Yeah, I just put it out of my mind. It's all negativity, and there's no need to dwell or focus on it. And there's nothing constructive that can come from, I'm going to kill you. And what am I going to do? Type back? Oh yeah, I'm going to kill you. I mean,
ooh, it's getting hot in here.
But listen to this headline. This kind of ties into what we're talking about. Politicians fear for their safety as threats against Congress skyrocket. Representative Barry Loudermilk of Georgia bought body armor. Representative Greg Harper hired armed security guards for events back home in Mississippi. And Representative Dan Donovan fortified his Brooklyn and Staten Island offices with security cameras and buzzer systems. This is the new normal for members of Congress 1 year after the horrific congressional shooting that almost took the life of Representative Steve Scalise and former Hill staffer Matt Mika. Members are keenly aware that serving in the public office has put a target on their backs. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I would say all the lies, the corruption, the theft, the hating of America, that's probably put the target on your back. But anyway, it goes on to say this. The true reality is if somebody wanted to do me harm, they could probably do that with relative ease. That from Representative Chuck Feiserman, a Republican from Tennessee. The threats against them have skyrocketed. In 2016, there were 902 threatening incidents and communications against members of Congress. By 2017, the reports had more than doubled to about 2,000. In response, House Administration Committee allocated $25,000 to each member in 2017 and again in 2018 to beef up their personal security and office safety, promoting members to hire bodyguards for events, equip officers with panic buttons, and shatter-resistant glass. An additional $5 million was allocated to improve office security for Congress members' district's office, as well as another $30 million for funding for the Capitol Police in 2018. So all these threats are equating to millions of more dollars wasted on these people's security. Like it's some kind of sick joke. It's ridiculous. But is it needed? That's the question.
Well, I would say that this is always a really, I guess you could say, contentious topic to deal with because, Joe, I know that you and I both don't want to see us continue to devolve into a security state. If you go to Manhattan, if you go to Washington, D.C., if you walk around the downtown of pretty much any major city in the country, I think you can make a pretty strong argument that we are already to a great degree in a security state. But my goodness, look at places like London or Paris. They have militarized, armed presence on the street where I mean, they've got guys in both Paris and London who are wearing fatigues and battle rattle and automatic weapons muzzle down, and it doesn't prevent ultimately any of the attacks that people would try to perform on these individuals. But when you talk about Representative Steve Scalise, and I'm glad you mentioned the other individual that was wounded in that shooting last year. Correct me if I'm wrong historically, but wasn't there a significant lack of actual security there? I know wasn't it a Capitol Police person who actually shot back and did take the perp down? But can you help me out historically with what went down there? Because it's been a year or more.
Well, just from memory, there was 2 Capitol Police officers the guy who had an AR-15, I forget his name, he has some weird name, but he came onto the area of the field and started firing at the members of Congress who were practicing on the field. And there were 2 Capitol Police officers, one male, one female. The female was actually shot by this James, I forget his last name, but she actually was the one who was able to return fire and bring him down and kill him. And the what is being said in this article by the New York Post cites one of the Congress members who was at the baseball game, who has a concealed carry license in his own district at home, and he supports the concealed carry reciprocity laws that, and it says this: members of Congress are not allowed to carry around their licensed concealed guns while in Washington, taking away one option to defend themselves. Unchanged is that only select members of leadership, 5 people out of 435 House members, are assigned security, including Scalise, whose heroic police officers fended off the baseball shooter last year. I'm trained at what I do and how I do it with a weapon, Representative Mike Bishop of Michigan said, who backs the carry reciprocity legislation. If I had the ability to carry, I would feel safer. Bishop said the defenselessness became crystal clear when I hit the ground that day on the baseball field and realized I had absolutely nothing to defend myself with against somebody who had a weapon that he was double tapping on. And it goes on to cite the shooting of Gabby Giffords in 2011. James Hodgkinson was the one who fired at the baseball field. At
the baseball field, yes. And then, of course, it was that kooky-looking alien kid, what was his name, Jared something, who shot Gabby Giffords.
Jared Lee Loeffner.
Thank you. Joe, what you just said is profound, and I don't have anything curated for Second Amendment commentary today, but imagine this. The representatives, 400, what is it right now, 454?
35.
435 of whom, now keep in mind, listeners, that vacillates every time we do the census because the number of representatives from each state vacillates. For example, California lost over 100,000 residents last year, so it changes. But 435, we send these 435 people, Joe, to represent us, and they pass legislation on a federal level that may or may not affect your ability to carry on a state level, or for example, on federal property. So even if you're in a good gun-friendly state, you've got, concealed carry, et cetera, you most likely, unless you're law enforcement, will not be able to carry into a federal building or into an airport. Okay. You have to be you have to have a federal badge, like an air marshal or something, FBI, to do that. But we're not trusting the lawmakers who make the laws on a national level to exercise their Second Amendment right. They're being undermined by, in some cases, county supervisors, city council, et cetera, and being prevented from carrying. And I think that there's a lot to be said with that, Joe. And moreover, the last thing I would say about it is that reciprocity, I think, is key moving forward. And I hope that that's something that President Donald Trump does accomplish here in his first administration, not just because it's good for pro-Second Amendment people, but because what it does is it creates uniform legal landscape so that you don't accidentally cross from, for example, the California state line over to the Oregon state. I'm sorry, from Oregon back into California. You can actually be committing a felony simply by forgetting to unholster your weapon and lock it in your trunk appropriately for the laws of the state of California. So people can accidentally step into a felony that does what? That ultimately will prevent you from being able to exercise your Second Amendment rights should you be indicted.
Listen to this crazy story. This congressman, this representative, what's his name here? He was one of the ones who was in the shooting. Loudermilk. Loudermilk is his name. He says this: 3 months after the shooting in September, he got rear-ended off the road, flipping his vehicle several times. A week after the car crash, a gunman shot at the car he was driving with his wife in the North Georgian mountains. Then he was on the Amtrak train January 31st with other Republicans heading to West Virginia retreat that hit a garbage truck, killing one person. So he went from the baseball shooting to a severe car accident to being shot at a week later to just a few months later being in that Amtrak crash. That's wow.
I think I mentioned this on the Daily Show once before. I'm going to give this like 20 seconds, but there's a semi-famous nurse, Joe, who had the unusual misfortune, much like this person you just mentioned, of get this. She was on, when we look at the age of the ocean liners, she was on the Mauritania when it got into a collision right out of port. She made it through that okay. She was on the Titanic when it sank in 1912, and she was on the sister ship, the Britannica, when it was sank by a German U-boat torpedo in the Aegean Sea in 17 or 18. This one single person, much like the person you just mentioned, was on 3 of the most notable ocean liner wrecks in the whole history of ocean liners. Yeah. And she happened to be on 3 of them, including the Titanic. It goes to show you that God puts people in a certain place at a certain time. And I would even dare say that he's got sometimes a bit of an ironic, dark sense of humor.
Yeah, and it's amazing, but the question is, should money's being allocated by the millions to increase security to Congress, and is it a landscape now where, with the rhetoric of the media and the political divisions, that this is the reality of the future of our political world, that the politicians are going to become targets for violence? That's you talk about a way to destabilize a nation, a republic. That is one way to do it, and it would not take long. You think Congress would allow a few of its members to get knocked off without taking actual drastic steps to make sure that didn't happen anymore?
I would hope not.
They would do whatever it took to make sure that didn't happen. And it's just you can't change. Okay, let's back up here. Don't go after and target the lawmakers. Just don't do it. It doesn't accomplish anything.
You shouldn't go after and target anybody. No. But yes, I agree with you absolutely. Absolutely, Joe. When you're comfortable with it, I've got 2 pieces I thought our listeners might find interesting. Well, where do you want to go first? I've got a piece that's posted on Steemit from our dear friend Honeybee that asks questions about Anthony Bourdain, and then I've got a little piece about Kratom.
Well, I want to talk about both. Let's talk about this Anthony Bourdain thing. This is going to be a very sensitive subject. I want to make sure we get this right. Now, I saw a picture yesterday or the day before of Bordeaux posing nude, basically, with some fake blood or real blood on him, I don't know, and with something about with spirit cooking. And John, you sent me a piece today. You said it was from Honeybee, and it shows similar behaviors. What's going on with this?
Well, I don't honestly know what's going on. So let's preface this by saying that this is an ongoing investigation. And Joe, I agree with you. This is a sensitive issue. I didn't know until this morning that Kate Spade is the sister of David Spade, who had a really good run in films. He did that one great film where he's an out of work comedian. And he has to go live with the family as a kid to like regress, and I can't remember. Dickie Roberts maybe is what the film was called. It was actually a pretty charming, clever little film. But
the weirdest thing about the Kate Spade suicide was the husband, David Spade's brother or whatever,
Oh, is that what it is? Their in-laws?
Coming out in the mouse mask.
That was really bizarre, and I don't have any further information on that except what flew around on social media. And Joe, I want to state for the record, I learned a valuable lesson last week, and I'm grateful that the Lord protected our platform from capitulating over into hysterical meme grabbing. And what's so tricky about that is a lot of times people grabbing memes and flying them around like so much artillery in the social media world, they're trying to do the right thing. But often, as we saw with the whole Tucson debacle, it can in fact work against what would be proper protocol. But when we look at this piece by Honeybee, now this is available at steamit.com. Joe, you have it in front of you as well. The title is Bloody Bourdain, Elite Suicide, Child Sex Trafficking, and the Business of Young Blood. Now, this is not, I don't know if this is Anthony Bourdain in the photo or if it's Mike Rowe. I think it's hard to tell because he's got on ball cap and big sunglasses.
It looks like Bourdain.
Okay. And I only mentioned Mike Rowe, who I have a lot of respect for. He is the voiceover narrator of Deadliest Catch, and he also did that really long-running show on Discovery about dirty jobs where he goes and hangs out with Mike guys Rowe in the trades.
I highly doubt he's involved in any of these things.
I would hope not. He seems like a pretty straight shooter, but his name has been attached to Bourdain. But yeah, let's walk away from that because I'm way out in the weeds. I don't know what Mike Rowe has to do with this. So let's say that the optic appears to be Bourdain, and people can go look for themselves. Again, it's at steamit.com. And it says here, Asia Argento, longtime girlfriend of recently, and she puts it in quotes, suicided Anthony Bourdain, was allegedly raped and assaulted by Harvey Weinstein. They both publicly slammed Weinstein in the media and social media, and Asia also made an uncomfortable speech at the Cannes Film Festival where she called out Weinstein as well as other perpetrators of sex abuse in Hollywood. Honeybee goes on to write, while looking into Bourdain's Instagram, I found the image with hashtag Weinstein depicting the flaying of Marsyas. Now, that's an infamous painting. It seems to me that Bourdain has a penchant for blood and sacrifice. I also found a few pictures of Harvey Weinstein and Rose McGowan alongside Renaissance paintings of females decapitating men, a bloody image of a heart that's been ripped out, and blood-drenched images of Bourdain himself and actor Robert De Niro. This all comes following the recent death of Kate Spade, sister-in-law of actor David Spade and aunt of actress Rachel Brosnahan, which was also ruled a suicide. The close proximity of these tragedies seem eerily similar, and Joe, you mentioned this last week on the evening show, to the high-profile suicides right at the beginning of the Hagmann Daily Show of Chris Cornell, Chester Bennington, and a handful of lawyers and politicians over the last year that all include some connection to sexual abuse, helping those that have been abused or directly connected to the Clinton-Obama cartel. Now, Joe, I'll cut this off there, and I'll hand it back to you. A lot opined here by Honeybee, but I do want to mention that just in the 3 paragraphs I read, there are easily 10 or 12 links. So she really did her best to underpin this, Joe, with secondary sources.
And I've been following and looking at these links over the last few minutes, and they're interesting. The one of Robert De Niro is pretty old, and it looks like I don't know that you can. He is drenched in blood, but I don't know. It looked like it was for a movie or something. But everything else that there's definitely a connection here. When you have Bourdain and his girlfriend being raped by Harvey Weinstein, and then the Hillary Clinton. I mean, all these people. This is what we're talking about. The spiritual battle of evil. This spirit cooking stuff was what really opened my. I mean, the Hillary Clinton and Podesta emails that dropped last November. That was all well and good. That did show a pattern of corruption and manipulation. But the spirit cooking stuff, there's no, and the pictures on their Instagram's accounts, and the references to kill rooms and and little children, there's no denying the artwork they had, the pictures that people are seen posing, eating and pretending to eat human beings and making cakes out of people, and I mean it's just the most disgusting and evil attitude and mindset one can have. The only way you can participate in things like that is if you yourself are a worshiper of Satan, I guess I could say, right?
Yes, and Honeybee and I had a conversation. We can announce publicly now that she and I will be covering a Red Pill Expo for Hagmann Report at the end of this month. So we've been getting our battle plan in order and figuring out, what we want to do once we're boots on the ground in Spokane, the interviews we want to grab, et cetera. So we've been speaking more offline lately than we normally do. And the sort of the opinion that we kind of arrived at consensus on last night, Joe, was something like this. And this ties into Peter Barry Chaka's commentary last night on Hagmann Report. It also ties into Dr. Ted Broer's commentary last Friday night, where he was able to extract biblical context to, as you said, Joe, the whole component of making cakes back in biblical times of actual human ingredients. And you have to go back and listen carefully to Hour 2 with Dr. Ted Broer last Friday, June 8th. And I'm not going to try to summarize it because I'll butcher it. But we think, Joe, that what may happen culturally is a big swath of millennials may come to realize when we see things like Dennis Rodman and how powerful. I mean, God bless the man. He's crazy. He married himself years ago. I mean, he's definitely a kook. But God bless him for his heart in this. And I think that when we see people like Dennis Rodman, like Kanye West, and even to a lesser extent Kim Kardashian, who we pick on mercilessly, and the whole new media picks on her. Between her and Joel Osteen, they're the two go-to whipping people, so to speak. Whenever you need an example of anything, she went to the White House early last week and was able to help facilitate the release of a senior citizen lady, African American woman, who was in there on drug charges and had been given like a 50 or so for some really long sentence. She was going to die in prison effectively, and the president released her. So we see on a cultural level, whether it's Kardashian with the president advocating for this African American woman and she was released, or whether we see Dennis Rodman saying, look, I was trying to advocate for peace between the American people and the people of North Korea, who he said, quote, they've got heart, they've got soul. And he's exactly right. I challenge any Christian listening to the show today to take issue with that. You better believe they've got heart and soul. They're human beings. They're God's children. So there could be a cultural shift, Joe, in what people are willing to accept. And I think that where the line is drawn is in these pictures of there's a picture on Twitter that's hot right now of Bourdain apparently. And I want to be careful. I don't know if this picture has been doctored or not, but it appears legit. There appears to be two photos side by side of Anthony Bourdain holding what appears to be a scientific specimen jar with a fully formed infant, or if this was an abortion, Joe, my God, it's got to be like, in the 11th hour, 59th minute. I'm not sure any state performs abortions of babies that have their hair grown on their heads already, but that picture's flying around on Twitter. And I think where a lot of people are going to depart from this reprobate Hollywood narrative, whether it's seeing Kevin Spacey go down, seeing Harvey Weinstein go down, seeing the chick from what was it, Smallville, wrapped up in Nexium. Each of these little components, Kanye's remarks, Kim Kardashian's work with President Trump, and most recently Dennis Rodman's emotional appeal last night with Chris Cuomo. People are going to start getting it, and they're going to say, you know what? In my spirit, I don't want to be part and party to a bloodied Robert De Niro or to this curmudgeonly old man who used to be a super cool actor saying F Trump publicly. I think there could be a shift, Joe, and we've got about 7 minutes left. I want to make sure you take us out with some good news today. I've got one more piece when you're ready, and this is just an insight that I want all of our listeners to be really aware of regarding Kratom and an insight from the Free Thought Project on medical marijuana. But we've got time if you want to go somewhere else first, Joe.
Well, interestingly, I was just I forgot about Dennis Rodman marrying himself, but I was just reading comments under the CNN video of the 16-minute interview with Dennis Rodman, and some of the comments are pretty eye-opening. I can't believe I'm typing this. I'm a Democrat, but I might vote for Trump. I hated Trump till now, but after today, I might even vote for him. God works in mysterious ways. I might actually vote for Trump in 2020. These are just some of the comments.
No kidding.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting if it's true. I don't usually. Who knows who's a bot, who's a real, who's even an American in some of those comments. But it's a step in the right direction. Absolutely, and I think everybody should be happy that, diplomacy seems to have won out over conflict, at least right now. So
remember what Ashton Birdie said last Monday night when she debuted with us on the Hagmann Report. And by the way, listeners, we're going to bring her back next week when she returns from London, having been at the big rally this past Saturday. But remember what Ashton Birdie said. She had the audacity, Joe, to make a sign that said, let's have a conversation. And I think we can say that one of the baseline fundamentals of our program here is if we talk and we parse through information to the best of our ability, then that keeps fists from flying, it keeps bullets from flying, it keeps missiles from flying. When people stop communicating, Joe, they will communicate in other more violent manners.
Yeah, they will. John, let's take the last 9-10 minutes and get into this topic of Kratom. We've talked about Kratom at length in the past, how it has helped people with addiction issues. It's been a help to people to take as a supplement, not only to feel better with your physically, and sometimes getting off painkillers, but also how it has the ability to help people with things like anxiety and depression, and how the FDA has launched a war on Kratom, trying to get it scheduled as a Schedule 1 narcotic, just because they don't like the fact that people are, breaking out of their pharmacy matrix and being able to go somewhere and naturally get a supplement that helps without the harmful side effects that we've seen with the opiate crisis. And John, acquiring Kratom is now becoming a very hard thing to do. Why don't you tell the audience exactly what it is that you went through in the last 24 hours?
I will. I just recently, this morning, I had conversations with the owner of one of the, I would say, more upstanding, reputable vendors of Kratom here in the United States. It's the state that he operates out of, it's perfectly legal. It's perfectly legal in the state that Joe and I are in right now. I first discovered Kratom in the state of Oregon, where it's legal, as it is in both California and Washington. So there's nothing illegal being chatted about here. It's not available in Alabama and a couple other states I can't remember, but it's available in, I think, 46 of the 50 states, if my memory serves correctly. So here's what's happening. Our listeners are very familiar with the corporate government oligarchy that will use the tools at their immediate disposal to shut down, whether it's shut down ideas they don't like on the Hagmann Report or shut down commerce that they don't like vis-a-vis people who are acquiring Kratom for chronic pain, chronic anxiety, etc. And so I talked to this purveyor. I also had a brief conversation with Josh Peck, who will join the Hagmann Report this Friday. And Josh has done a lot of public commentary on Kratom. He suffers from some various physical ailments, and he's been very transparent, Joe, about how significant it's been for him. Josh suffers from a bone disease. Can you imagine a bone disease? I mean, that sounds painful just saying it. So bottom line is this. If you use Kratom, you need to stock up right now. And I don't mean you need to put it on your calendar for 3 weeks from now when you get your whatever check. You need to do it right now. This is a story developing in real time. The organization that I purvey the Kratom that I use from is unable to process Visa or MasterCard transactions at this time. And in speaking with the owner for over half an hour this morning, Joe, and I offered him a friendly hand, by the way, so we may hear from this individual, provided he comes to a place where he needs public amplification. Right now, to use his words, quote, we're trying to lay low and work this out so that we can continue to serve our customers. They're doing the same thing, Joe, that we've seen them do with gun dealers, with legitimate licensed FFLs. We've seen Visa say, we're not going to process, you go down to your local store to buy a shotgun, perfectly legally, but Visa will stop you. They will prevent you with their credit card envoys refusing to process the transaction. That is what's happening right now today, Tuesday, June 12th, with Kratom. If you use it, you need to get a significant supply laid in right now, or I'm telling you directly from the owner of one of the larger companies, you will not be able to acquire the herbal supplement that you're currently using. They're doing their best to work around the issue. Joe, I had to facilitate my transaction through another means because, again, the credit card portals have been shut down.
Well, that's very disturbing to hear, and We know that we've read the press releases that have come out of the FDA about kratom, and they continue to demonize and use evidence that is not, I mean, they can't even verify the evidence. They don't even know why it is they want to ban kratom, because they don't understand how it works. They say it's not an opioid, but it works the same way in the brain that an opioid does. But because it's not an opioid, they can't understand how that is possible. So it must be dangerous, and we must keep it from the public. And it is, I'm so sick and tired of the government, being, the Constitution was put there to limit what the government's powers would be, not to be able to increase and make all these laws and laws banning everything. Tell us what we can eat, what we can ingest, what we can do, what we can't do. It's crazy, how far we've come as a nation that was founded on the basis of freedom from religious tyranny and oppression, from political tyranny and oppression, and we've enslaved ourselves right back in that model. Whether it's the legalization of marijuana or trying to schedule kratom as some kind of Schedule I drug, it is, this war on drugs has been, just a prison revolving door, and it's as they say, it's like taking trying to drain the ocean with a teaspoon. It's the wrong approach. I don't know what the right approach is, but especially when things like this with kratom. And this is a piece from the Huffington Post. FDA releases kratom data death, undermines its own claims. And I would usually never cite a Huffington Post article, but it goes on to say this. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration is escalating its campaign against kratom with the release of new information describing a series of deaths involving the popular herbal drug. The FDA says the incidents underscore the serious and sometimes deadly risks of kratom, but the list contains a number of events which kratom played an uncertain role, including a case in which a teenager hanged himself, another which is a drug overdose where the guy tested positive for 9 different substances. As a whole, the data suggests that the FDA is basing its warnings about kratom's fatal harms on a patchwork of loosely sourced anecdotal reporting that say very little about how the drug is responsible for the fatalities or even whether it is at all. And that is an article on the Huffington Post from February of this year. And it is this kind of behavior that, John, we get so frustrated with when they're trying to make laws based on their own perverted science or justifications, not based on the truth, not based on reality, but just because they can or they want to. And it is unfortunately a substance that many people have gravitated to use instead of the harmful pharmaceutical drugs that have so many side effects and literally can kill you. Even withdrawing from some of them can kill you. But, you can't have, it's the whole war against the holistic medicines. And this has been an ongoing war with the medical association and the holistic medical community for decades. Why do you think every time we have any alternative health expert or guest on, they always have to put a disclaimer out? What the statements I make cannot be taken as medical advice, and nothing I sell or urge you to use can heal or cure. Or they have to frame even their own medical truths in a disclaimer because of the government. It's just ridiculous. But we will see what happens. Reach out to your local representative and push back on this. Tell them if you are a user of kratom, if it's helped you in some way. Make your voice be heard, and let the people who are doing this know that they got people out there who are going to push back against their bureaucracy and their constant making of things illegal with the stroke of a pen. It's a bit much in the face of 60,000 plus overdose deaths last year that they're going after kratom, something that can actually help. But we're out of time. We'll be back tomorrow.
The Hagmann Daily Show is brought to you by the Hagmann Report. Tune in to the Hagmann Report weekdays, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, go to HagmannReport.com. That's HagmannReport.com.